This time we'll look at some of the earliest scrambler or motocross bikes of the 1950s. It's said that scrambling, of course later known as motocross by the rest of the world, was born on Camberley Heath, Surrey, in England of course, in 1924. The story goes that they took one of the time sections of a trial and released everybody all at once in a sort of free-for-all race. One of the competitors is said to have said, "This is going to be a bit of a scramble," and the name was born. And while the rest of the world would rechristen the sport motocross, to an Englishman it will always be known as scrambling. 10 years later, in the mid-30s, then the bikes were becoming increasingly specialised towards off-road or scrambling, and in the immediate post-war era, most companies would offer a scrambles version of their big singles. So let's now look at 5 OG scramblers, as Tom I'm sure would call them. The BSA Gold Star. The BSA Gold Star, introduced in its original M24 form in 1938. The machine's best known of course as a road racing sporting machine, but was also used very successfully off-road too, in both trials and scrambles. The earlier BSA models which had been used off-road had used an iron head, so the Gold Star was actually significantly lighter and more powerful, which is a great combination for off-road work. The bike was of course continuously developed during its lifetime and was available as either a 350 or a 500cc model, with the 496cc engine in the 500 producing a claimed 30 horsepower. However, after the end of World War II, the Gold Star did not immediately reappear in production, and in fact production of the first models wouldn't start until 1949, and then it was particularly concentrated around the 350 model, the ZB32. And although most people want the 500 models these days, the 350 is often regarded as the sweeter engine, and was the most successful initially both on and off-road, and it would be some time before the 500 began to really take hold in clubman racing. Now whilst pretty much all post-war models were fitted with telescopic forks, initially the bike did have a rigid rear end, and this was surprisingly popular with the off-road and trials riders at the time who thought it gave them better feel. However, the success of Royal Enfield's Bullet in trials would prove this thinking to be incorrect. But in 1953, the BB34GS and BB32GS were added to the range, and these were the first BSA Gold Stars to have a swinging arm frame. Although if you really wanted them, you could still have the rigid or plunger rear ends. Another major improvement in 53 was a much broader choice of gearboxes. You could now optimise your gearing for off-road in terms of trials or scrambles, or of course on-road clubman's racing. Now in all forms, the Gold Star was continuously developed throughout its lifetime, which really culminates with the DBD 34 and 32 series of 1956. These machines had a big finned engine that produced around 40 horsepower. But while these machines would prove popular as desert races in the USA, the fact is that in scrambles they were beginning to struggle. Two-strokes were really creeping into the market, with specialist builders such as Greaves becoming particularly successful. BSA would then take the decision to end production of their Gold Star in 1963, when BSA would take the decision to replace the mighty Gold Star with machines based off the much more humble C15 range. And while these machines would never have the performance of the Gold Star, they were much more nimble and much lighter, and would even deliver World Championship success for BSA in the mid-60s. The Ariel Red Hunter series. With a fairly lightweight construction, Ariel's big singles were always popular in off-road pursuits, for motocross and perhaps even more famously in trials. Now, the Red Hunter series was introduced in 1932 and was a styling job really done by Edward Turner based on Val Page's earlier singles. Turner would give the sporting models a nice chrome finish, high exhaust in case you wanted to go off-roading, and would dub them the Red Hunter series. From 48 onwards, the Red Hunters would be known as the KHs. Now at that time, Ariel had a reputation for tough reliability, and in fact all KH engines were bench tested for 2 hours prior to being assembled into the motorcycle. The bike was of course available as a 350 and 500cc form, and was the fairly typical big cylinder 4-stroke overhead valve motor. Early models had external push tubes and cast iron head and barrels. Post-war models would gradually develop this to have cast-in pushrod tubes and aluminium heads and barrels. Instead of trim, the engine wasn't particularly powerful, with the standard 500 making around 24 horsepower for a top speed around 87 miles an hour on the road. But the combination of robustness, lightweight and reliability would make them a very popular choice for off-roading, with trials age Sammy Miller making use of one from 1955 onwards. And in fact, Miller's specially lightened 500 would carry him to victories in major trial events for many years, even after Ariel 4-stroke production had ended in 1959. The Maxus G3C. Now, Maxus has a long and proud history of producing sporting singles, and these of course would be used for off-road and road competition, as well as just for general riding through the 1930s, with models such as the G80 proving extremely popular. And these models would lead directly to the development of the G3L with its telescopic forks, which was used by the military during World War II. Now, the G3L would prove itself to be one of the finest dispatch riding bikes of the period, and it should come as no surprise that these machines would be popular mounts when Moto Cross, or scrambling as it was then, restarted at the end of hostilities. Now, while it's true that the AMC management were a contrary lot, they weren't slow to see the potential of the G3 and indeed the G80 as a motocross or off-road machine. And indeed, Maxus were very early adopters of swinging arm rear suspension in the post-war period. The G3C was a 348cc overhead valve single-cylinder unit with a compression ratio of 8.8 to 1. AMC claimed 23 horsepower at 6,000 RPM with 21 foot-pounds of torque at just 4,500 RPM. The bike had a curb weight of 414 pounds or 188 kilos. And indeed, these machines would prove popular in the post-war period. However, by the 1960s, AMC was still producing the same overhead valve non-unit construction machines for scramble racing in a period where most other companies had gone either unit construction 4-stroke singles or had moved on to the lighter weight and increasingly potent 2-strokes. Maxus, however, would stick to their guns and would continue to develop their pre-unit heavyweight singles right up until the end of production in 1966, when AMC would be declared bankrupt. Triumph TR5 Trophy. As a general rule, when you think about motocross bikes, you're usually thinking about something with a single-cylinder engine of either 4-stroke or 2-stroke flavours. You don't generally consider twin-cylinder engines when it comes to off-roading. And indeed, in terms of success, the single-cylinder engine seems to be the way to go. But that hasn't stopped some companies from trying, including, of course, Triumph and their parallel twin engines. Now, Triumph's TR5 Trophy was of course closely based off their Speed Twin 500 model, and of course gained its name because it was developed for the International 6-Day Trial of 1948, which incidentally took place in Italy. The trophy would be developed into various forms, including trials, scrambles, and was also very popular in AMA racing in the United States. Legend has it, of course, that the first of these machines made use of a head and barrel originally developed for a generator set used on bombers during World War II. When supplies of these ran out at the end of 1950, the company went on and cast and developed an all-new aluminium cylinder head and barrel specifically for the model. And in fact, there was even a road racing tuning kit available if you wanted to take your Tiger 500 Roadster out on, say, the TT Clubman circuit. This included a sporty exhaust as well as various other tuning parts. Now, while the trophy model was used as a trials bike and a scrambler, it was never as successful as it was at international 6-day eventing. And in fact, it was even used by Steve McQueen in the American team during the 1960s. The late 50s would see a move to unit construction, but this model too would be successful at the ISDT, placing in second as late as 1973. The Venom Scrambler. The Venom was introduced in 1955 and was a 499cc single-cylinder overhead valve big, single obviously, with air cooling and high-mounted camshaft which made the engine rather tunable. The motor started life in the MSS Touring model, but as they phased out their overhead cam models and wanted something sporty to replace it, They decided the easiest thing to do, and by far the cheapest, was to develop a tuned version of the MSS overhead valve bike. And this would of course be the Venom or Viper in 350 form. The engine ran square dimensions of 86 by 86 mm and gave 34 horsepower claimed at 6,200 rpm, enough on road trim to give around 100 miles an hour top speed potential, although of course not in the Scrambler because this was obviously much lower geared. The bike used an old-fashioned brazed lug frame, but this frame was fairly light and pretty narrow, so in December 1958 Veloset took the fairly obvious step of developing the bike into a Scrambler. The machine of course made use of the potent Venom engine, but with lower overall gearing. The front wheels changed out for a 21-incher and the frame was specially lightened for the job. And there was of course a raised exhaust and lightweight aluminium mudguards. And because it was designed for off-road use, it used a smaller peanut tank also. Some of the machines were sent over to the United States for evaluation in endurance events and of course desert races. And there was even a model that was available with a lighting set, making what was possibly the first dual sport motorcycle. So what bikes or collections of bikes would you like to see us cover in a future video? Maybe you've got a bike we can use for a test ride. Either way, please get in touch. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.